the senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside, it's raging, and it'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing.
In A Dance with Dragons, right before Theon's escape from Winterfell, we are presented with the murder of Little Walder Frey, a 9-year-old boy. The body was found in the snow by his cousin, Big Walder Frey, and the murder remains a mystery. Now, this is a fairly significant event as it leads to Little Walder's uncle Hostine attacking Wyman Manderly, who Hostine believes is responsible. Both the Freys and the Manderlys are then sent out of the castle to attack Stannis, setting up the Battle of Ice. But who exactly committed this murder, and does the death of this young boy really make a difference? Well, let's talk about who Little Walder and his cousin Big Walder are. Big and Little Walder were wards at Winterfell that Cat agreed to take on after negotiating the Stark-Frey alliance. However, it's important to note that the coupling of Big and Little Walder predates that alliance. Prior to the Stark warding, Old Walder Frey tried to have Jon Arryn take them on in exchange for fostering Sweet Robin. It should be noted that there are plenty of other Freys who are around Big and Little Walder's age who could have been warded, yet it seemed important that these two particular boys be warded together. Now, having two boys fostered by Jon Arryn together echoes two other boys who were fostered by him, Ned and Robert. And we know how that went. Ned and Robert became the best of friends. And that's important to note. Rickard Stark's southern ambitions could have simply relied on a Robert-Lyanna marriage, but a Ned-Robert friendship was an element desired on top of that, an element that became highly significant. Now, the Stark-Frey alliance included both Robb marrying a Frey and Arya marrying Elmar Frey. Old Walder Frey's northern ambitions would seem well satisfied, yet here on top of all that, we have the fostering of Big and Little Walder. And remember, this is something the Freys requested of the Starks, not the reverse. The Starks were not asking for hostages. Old Walder Frey requested that they be taken. So for some odd reason, Old Walder very much wanted Big and Little Walder to be friends. Why? Well, as I discussed in the Frey Civil War video, although Old Walder Frey values his whole family, the rest of his family doesn't feel this way. House Frey has factions. Freys generally only trust full-blooded siblings, and specifically Merryt Frey, who is a Crakehall Frey, and Lothar Frey, who is a Blackwood Frey, don't like each other. And who are Big and Little Walder? Why, they happen to be Merryt Frey's son and Lothar Frey's nephew, a Crakehall Frey and a Blackwood Frey. So it seems the fostering of Big and Little Walder together was a deliberate action to help repair the growing rift between the Frey factions. Maybe. It should also be noted that Old Walder Frey forgot who exactly Big Walder was and who his father was. This points to the fact that the coupling of Big and Little Walder was not actually Old Walder's idea. Of course, the real idea man at the Twins is its steward, Lothar Frey, the man behind the Red Wedding. If it were the scheming Lothar, Big Walder may have a different function in following around Little Walder. Now, George R. R. Martin has gone to great efforts to have us confuse and conflate Big and Little Walder. After all, they are two boys of nearly the same age who hang together who are both named Walder Frey. And on top of that, the terms used to differentiate them, big and little, are exceptionally poor, as Big Walder is the little one and Little Walder is the big one. But we shouldn't fall for it. Instead, let's be extra careful and figure out exactly who they are. Let's start with our murdered boy, Little Walder. Little Walder is Merryt Frey's son. Of course, Merryt we know better than any other Frey, as he was a POV character, and Jaime gives us quite a bit of his backstory. For the most part, Merryt is big and oafish. It should be noted that Merryt's brother Hostine is also very large, and his daughter Fat Walda and his son Big Walder are as well. And Merryt's daughter Gatehouse Amy is a healthy wench. Catelyn specifically says that Crakehalls are big-boned. It's worth noting that Lyle Crakehall, the strong boar, is also a big oaf. The Crakehall sigil is, of course, a boar, that is, a wild pig, a sigil that Little Walder wears quartered with his Frey one and the Plowmen of Derry. It seems that many Crakehalls and Crakehall Freys are like big boars and pigs. Catelyn describes Fat Walda as squeaking and being pink, and Old Walder calls her a sow and a porkling. Little Walder as well is called a piglet and a hog. And even in personality, the Crakels and the Crakell Freys are like boars in that they're bullies. Jaime describes Merritt as the castle bully when they are squires at Crakell, and the one conversation we have with Fat Walda is her disparaging Fair Walda. Little Walder follows suit and takes interest in bullying Bran and Theon, and takes joy in cruelty. The point of all of this is that with Little Walder, he's similar to his kin, and he's similar to his sigil, a big mean oaf. Which brings us to Big Walder. He's a Blackwood Frey. Although we do not know his father well, we know his uncle Lothar Frey, the conniving architect of the Red Wedding conspiracy. The Blackwood sigil is a conspiracy of ravens with a weirwood tree, a sigil that Big Walder wears quartered with his Frey one and the snakes of Page. Now, of course, the most famous Blackwood is Bloodraven, perhaps the most conniving character in our story. This isn't to say that Blackwoods are all like this. Certainly Hoster Blackwood seems a straightforward, honest youth, but Lothar is not. He oddly thinks it's a good thing that the two Freys, Edwin and Black Walder, are in a feud. The point is, if Little Walder is like his cruel and oafish father and sigil, we should look out for Big Walder being like his crafty and conspiratorial uncle and sigil. And on top of this, Big Walder looks like a fox, an animal famous for slyness and deception. So after the formation of the Stark-Frey alliance, Big and Little Walder make it to Winterfell in a clash of kings. To pass the time, the Walders play a game called Lord of the Crossing, and the game's goal is to become the titular lord. The game is supposed to be about whether one can clandestinely slip in the word mayhaps into a speech. One would think that the clever Big Walder would be a master at this game. However, in practice, the game seems to be about shoving, and thus Little Walder ends up winning most of the time. Now this is our introduction to the boys, brute force winning over cleverness, so you can imagine how this makes Big Walder feel. He is born to lose, Lord of the Crossing. Big Walder then tells us about his relationship with Little Walder. We're cousins, not brothers. I'm Walder, son of Jamos. My father was Lord Walder's son by his fourth wife. He's Walder, son of Merritt. His grandmother was Lord Walder's third wife, the Crakell. He's ahead of me in the line of succession, even though I'm older. So we should remember only full-blooded siblings are trusted. Big Walder, right off the bat, tells us that Little Walder is not his trusted family, and his grandmother is called the Crakell, which doesn't sound very respectful. Big Walder is also strangely focused on the line of succession, even saying that people after him don't matter. And he seems a little annoyed that Little Walder is ahead of him in the line of succession, even though Big Walder is older and clearly smarter. Little Walder responds to Big Walder in a bullying fashion, saying, "Neither of us will ever hold the twins, stupid." In which Big Walder says, "I will." Now Big Walder seems again born to lose the real game of Lord of the Crossing. He is way down the line of succession. We aren't quite sure if female Freys are in the line or if the children of female Freys are, but even excluding them, there are around 40 people in front of Big Walder for the twins. And many of them are safely scattered all over the world. Of course, there are rules, as in succession, and then there's what happens in practice, as in force. We certainly learned this with Lord of the Crossing. So perhaps Big Walder has a long game with succession, or maybe he thinks his uncle Lothar will usurp the twins and he will inherit it from him, or perhaps Big Walder thinks he can usurp the twins himself. Now despite this seemingly antagonistic relationship between the boys, Big Walder and Little Walder do spend a great deal of time playing together, and they are joined by Rickon, who shows them where the Stark crypts are. We next run into Big and Little Walder jousting. Despite Big Walder being a better horseman, Little Walder's size makes him the better jouster. Once again, Big Walder is born to lose. The two boys then begin to make fun of Hodor, which causes a dispute between Bran and an aggressive Little Walder. Big Walder urges caution because of Bran's direwolf, and then the two are yelled at by Maester Luwin. Big Walder then diffuses the situation with a polite apology. After that, we run into the Walders when the Reeds arrive, and Little Walder calls them names, and then Luwin brings news of war. Big Walder correctly says that the death of Steffan Lannister isn't important, as he's not Tywin, and then neither Big or Little Walder show any sadness over the death of their uncle Stevron Frey. Stevron is neither a Blackwood nor a Crakell. The two go into succession talk, and once again Big Walder declares that he will be Lord of the Crossing. After Theon captures Winterfell, Little Walder cruelly and stupidly taunts Bran and the Reeds, but he does convince Theon to take him on the hunt for Bran and Rickon after their escape. Ramsay then burns Winterfell and captures the two boys. In a storm of swords, Ramsay then instructs Big Walder to write a letter to the Freys, claiming that the Ironborn put everybody to the sword, and that Ramsay saved the women and children. In A Dance with Dragons, we then find Big and Little Walder serving Ramsay at the Dreadfort as squires. They retrieve Theon, who Little Walder cruelly finds funny, and Big Walder warns Little Walder that Ramsay doesn't want Theon washed. The two travel to Moat Cailin with Ramsay and Theon, and then to Barrowton. Little Walder orders Theon to take care of his horse, but Big Walder handles his own horse. Theon notes that Big Walder rarely participates in the cruelties of his cousin. Big Walder then proceeds to tell Theon about how Ramsay murdered a goat herder, but how the goats tasted pretty good afterwards. At the feast later, Little Walder has clearly become Ramsay's favorite as he fills Ramsay's cup, while Big Walder fills everyone else's. And then finally at Winterfell, we don't actually hear very much of the boys. A washerwoman dances with Little Walder, and he builds some snowmen near the battlement's gate. That is, until the murder. So the body of Little Walder Frey is found in the morning, although most of Winterfell has been up for hours due to Crowfoot Umber's drums and war horns. Everyone in the castle thought an attack was coming, but it never did. When the Theon chapter begins, Theon, Mance, Rowan, and Squirrel are sitting in the Great Hall awaiting their escape plan. Horsebane Umber, Aenys Frey, Roger Risewell, Harwood Stout, Wyman Manderly, and Old Lord Locke are already there. Risewell laughs with Stout, Manderly gorges on food next to Locke. Roose Bolton then enters, yawning with Fat Walder Frey, and they sit on the dais. Ramsay enters in a foul mood, buckling on his sword belt. He argues with Roose, and Fat Walder's face goes to fear. And then Hostine enters with Big Walder, a dozen Frey knights, and Little Walder's body.
My brother Merritt's son.
Hostine Frey lowered the body on the floor before the dais.
Butchered like a hog, and shoved beneath a snowbank. A boy.
It should be noted that Big Walder's chest, arms, and cloak are splattered with blood, and his hands are caked in it. However, Little Walder's blood is frozen. And that's the big question. If Little Walder's blood was frozen, how did Big Walder become speckled in it? Big Walder must have been there when Little Walder's blood was warm. He must have been there when Little Walder died. And since Little Walder was ahead of him in the line of succession, Big Walder had a motive for murder, and since there had been other murders at Winterfell, this gave Big Walder the ability to cover his tracks. Big Walder is the murderer. The case has been solved. Except that doesn't really make any sense. Big Walder is the smart one. Smart enough to write detailed letters, know the family's line of succession, and the political importance of Tywin Lannister. Would he really kill Little Walder, hide the body, and then report on the dead body before cleaning himself up? That's an exceptionally dumb move for a clever boy. Why even alert anyone to where the body is? Let the body be buried in the snow until spring. Not to mention, Big Walder must have known the consequences of his actions. Big Walder blames the Manderlys, yet everyone knows very well that the Freys and the Manderlys have tensions. His accusations would certainly cause major turmoil. Big Walder doesn't stand to gain from the Bolton alliance breaking down. The drums and the war horns have made everyone think that Stannis' army is right outside. Why cause internal turmoil, especially at this juncture? In fact, as a result of his actions, the Freys and Big Walder himself are sent off to war. Big Walder could certainly die. We last see Big Walder in the Asha fragment, about to enter battle against Stannis' forces. And yet we know Big Walder to be cautious and conflict-averse. And on top of all of this, Big Walder is the little one. Would he really attempt to kill his much bigger and much stronger cousin? A cousin who physically bested him at both Lord of the Crossing and jousting? Keep in mind, Little Walder wasn't killed from a sneaky stab in the fashion of Arya Stark. No, his body was butchered. And even if Big Walder did manage to kill Little Walder, would little skinny Big Walder really be able to drag his cousin's fat pig-like body to a snowbank to hide it? Another thing that just doesn't fit is that Big Walder is a Blackwood Frey who wants to rule the twins. He's supposed to be a schemer. Killing a Frey that's around 30th in line for the twins is not a clever scheme. It's blunt, crude, and of little value. Not to mention, schemers don't generally do their own killing. They get other people to do their killing. For example, we don't hear about Lothar killing anyone himself at the Red Wedding. So although our author certainly wants us to suspect Big Walder, it just doesn't make any sense for him to be the killer. The blood confirms that Big Walder was present for the killing, but he doesn't seem to actually be the murderer. So who's the real killer? Well, let's go through some suspects. Theon thinks the spearwives are the culprits, and they have been murdering people in order to create tension in the castle. And some of those murders have been in a gruesome fashion, so what's one more? They had been dancing with Little Walder earlier, perhaps they let him off and killed him as a distraction for their escape. While this would make a whole lot of sense, the spearwives vehemently deny responsibility for this murder while confessing to at least the murder of Yellow Dick. They also seem to really hate Theon because he's a child murderer, which would make one think that they wouldn't do this action themselves. But the big thing that really shows that the spearwives are telling the truth is that they claim their innocence in the Godswood. The werewoods watch them, and the followers of the old gods do not lie in front of werewoods. Not to mention, if the spearwives did it, why is Big Walder covered in blood? He wouldn't have any reason to cover up the spearwives' actions. So definitely not the spearwives. So who else? Well, Big Walder himself accuses the Manderlys. Could he be telling the truth about that? Well, let's go over the accusation. Lord Ramsay descended from the dais to the dead body. His father rose more slowly, pale-eyed, still-faced, solemn. This was foul work. For once Roose Bolton's voice was loud enough to carry. Where was the body found? Under that ruined keep, my lord, replied Big Walder. The one with the old gargoyles. The boy's gloves were caked with his cousin's blood. I told him not to go out alone, but he said he had to find a man who owed him silver.
What man? Ramsay demanded. Give me his name, point him out to me, boy, and I will make you a cloak of his skin.
He never said, my lord, only that he won the coin at dice. The Frey boy hesitated. It was some White Harbor men who taught dice. I couldn't say which ones, but it was them.
My lord, boomed Hostine Frey, we know the man who did this, killed this boy, and all the rest. Not by his own hand, no. He is too fat and craven to do his own killing, but by his word.
He turned to Wyman Manderly.
Do you deny it?
The Lord of White Harbor bit a sausage in half. I confess. He wiped the grease from his lips with his sleeve. I confess that I know little of this poor boy. Lord Ramsay's squire, was he not? How old was the lad?
9 on his last name day.
So young, said Wyman Manderly, though mayhaps it was a blessing. Had he lived, he would have grown up to be a Frey. Now I will say that Wyman Manderly is lying a bit here. He knows exactly who Little Walder is and how old he is. Little Walder is betrothed to his granddaughter Wyla. Now, with Manderly's son dying at the Red Wedding, he has plenty of motive to kill Freys, especially ones that are supposed to marry into his family. And if Manderly did kill Rhaegar Frey, it shows he has no problem with killing innocent people. We have no evidence that Rhaegar was part of the Red Wedding, and neither does Manderly. And if he did bake Freys into pies, it shows that Manderly is certainly capable of massively sickening cruelty. So killing a 9-year-old boy shouldn't really be anything to him. After all, he's still chowing down on food with a dead child in front of him. Plus, Manderly seems to have no fear of creating conflict with the Freys. Keep in mind, Hostine's nephew is dead here, and Hostine is clearly upset about it. Little Walder was the only son of his late brother Merritt, whose death was not that long ago. Plus, Hostine also suspects that his brother Simon has been killed by Manderly and has been quite distressed about that. Hostine is an emotional wreck, and Manderly knows very well that making insulting jokes about the murder of a 9-year-old boy will spark conflict, and yet he does it anyway. Still, the Manderlys being the culprits doesn't make any sense either. Again, Big Walder is covered in blood. He was definitely present for the murder. It would make no sense for him to cover up for a Manderly culprit by implying he wasn't there and can't recognize him, only to then accuse the Manderlys as the culprits. Also, Big Walder's words simply don't ring true. He never said, my lord, only that he won the coin at dice. The Frey boy hesitated. It was some White Harbor men who taught dice. I couldn't say which ones, but it was them. The hesitation in the middle is glaring. Now, hesitation can mean lots of things, but usually with George R. R. Martin, it means that a person is choosing their words carefully. Is Big Walder choosing his words carefully because the latter part is a lie? It's a very odd claim that he knew White Harbor men taught dice, but he couldn't say which ones. Keep in mind, everyone's been at Winterfell for over a month. Now, it should be noted that lots of people were dicing at Winterfell, but specifically, we hear about Ramsay's boys, Luton and Skinner, playing dice the night before. It seems much more likely that Little Walder, who is Ramsay's squire, would be dicing with Luton and Skinner, who are Ramsay's men, rather than with some random White Harbor men. After all, why would White Harbor men, whose liege lord's son died in the Red Wedding, choose to dice with a Frey? Oh, and let's talk about Luton for a second. Luton is one of Ramsay's 6 boys, though he's not one of Ramsay's favorite. Those would be Skinner, Damon Dance for Me, and Sour Allen. Now, Luton, as it happens, appears in remarkably few scenes. He is actually only mentioned 3 times. Once is by Roose Bolton, who is listing the bastard boys and saying that they are really his men. Once is when he is dicing, and once is when he dies on the floor after the Frey Manderly fight. He is, by the way, the only non-Frey and non-Manderly to die in that fight. Well, actually he's first mortally wounded, and then Ramsay silences him. Now we should ask, why on earth would Luton, of all people, get hurt in a scuffle between the Freys and the Manderlys? Yes, Dreadfort men were separating them, but Luton had no dog in that fight. Luton, by all accounts, is a selfish piece of shit like the rest of the Bastards boys. Why would he be trying to break up a fight? And why would any Manderly or Frey want to hurt him? Again, he's the only Dreadfort man to die. It seems exceedingly likely that Luton was not breaking up the fight, but was instead targeted. So now we have 2 suspicious deaths, Luton and Little Walder, and both of them were supposedly dicing the night before. So really, when we look at Big Walder's account of the events, it looks like they're mostly true. They did find the body under the ruined keep with the gargoyles, and it looks like Big Walder did tell Little Walder not to go alone. In fact, it's very clear Big Walder went with him, so he wasn't alone. And it's probable that Little Walder was seeking a man who owed him silver from dice. The only lie, which comes after the hesitation, was that it was White Harbor men. It was really Luton. Only Little Walder winning at dice is a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, he's only 9. And according to Big Walder, he was just learning the game of dice. Inexperienced children tend not to win games against experienced adults. If Little Walder won money at dice, it seems like it was done intentionally. This makes the whole meeting seem like a setup. But why would Luton set up and kill Little Walder? After all, Luton butchering Ramsay's squire is an exceedingly bold move. And if Luton killed Little Walder, why would he spare Big Walder? Plus, he's a bastard's boy who are about torturing and keeping people alive. Little Walder was butchered. The boldness and the butchering points not to Luton, but to Luton's boss, Ramsay. Ramsay is the one who is described as sloppy like a butcher. Could Ramsay have killed his own squire? And was Luton complicit, and that's why Ramsay was silencing him? Well, the short answer is yes, that's what happened. But why on earth would Ramsay do that? Well, we'll discuss why Ramsay is the likely murderer, and why the murder of Little Walder is essential for Ramsay's plan in part 2. We'll see you then.